I'm recording on that, so if you guys keep talking, it's fine.
Okay.
We'll get this thing started.
How did all this start for you? Like, where did your journey start in, fighting, wrestling, grappling?
Well, I come from a long line, 3 generations of wrestlers that are all up on that wall over there.
Wow.
My grandfather, my father, all my uncles, my little brother. My father took state in Illinois. My little brother took state here. My uncle's a DT national champion, so I kind of grew up wrestling stuff. And then where I was raised was in the South Valley of Albuquerque. And it's a good place, but it's kind of rough and tumble. And so pretty much our state is one of the worst as far as poverty. And then that's probably the worst part of it with that, and maybe the war zone. There's a couple of places that probably vie for number one, but
There's a place called the War Zone?
Yeah, well, we call it the International District, but
Right.
Albuquerque, just because we have we're such a low economic, we're on the low economic run, so we have all the problems that come with that. So at that time, the people I was growing up around, some of the best people in the world, but then also some people that really didn't care about anything except if you could beat them up. So I figured, well, I better figure out how to beat them up. So I didn't see a Bruce Lee movie or anything like that. It was all necessity based, like I needed to fight tomorrow. So martial arts kind of bounced around a little bit, and then like a lot of people at that time, karate doesn't work against little Hispanic boxers, and so you go to wrestling, you go to all this. So I was doing a very primitive form of MMA, very primitive. And then the Gracies came out with the UFC, and the Gracies were like PhDs, right? And I was like in kindergarten. So I started trying to catch up. I never wanted to fight myself. It's not something I don't enjoy it enough to put up with the rest of it, but I do like helping people. So that kind of solidified my path. People asked me, hey, when I would get in fights or whatever, they'd say, hey, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So then I would start training them, and they would bring their friends. And so I just started training all my friends. I opened my first school in 1992 when I was about 17, right before I was 18. So right around then I opened my first school. And then the UFC came out, and then they wanted to compete. So they talked me into competing. Like, let's go and do all these fights. I was like, yeah, we'll do okay, you know what I mean? But then we'll go back to, because for me, martial arts was, like I said, necessity based, and it was very rare that you fought one dude, right? It was always like 2 or 3 on one or whatever. And so
You're like, this is a lot easier just to fight.
Right, well, and for me, it was like not real. You get caught up in these 80s, like, oh, it's not realistic, not even understanding what that means, which is where I was. So, but then they won everything, and then they were addicted, so then they kept asking me to go to different stuff, and then we kept winning, and now here, 27 years, I am in front of you. That's basically the highs and lows of it.
Did you ever wrestle any of the family members? You ever wrestle Grandpa?
Oh yeah, my dad. I mean, I grew up wrestling.
We used to box against our grandfather all the time. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, and we were really little at the time, but he still wouldn't take it easy. He'd pop you, and you'd end up crying. He wanted you to learn, keep your hand. He would tell you to keep your hands up.
And if you didn't,
he'd give you a little
correction,
a little jab.
I grew up wrestling. My brother and I both grew up wrestling. My uncles, my father in particular, constantly. We were very rough and tumble kids. So yeah.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler too, right?
That is a fact. That he was. Super strong too.
Yeah, so you grew up just kind of in a rough and tumble neighborhood. So that's just the way things were all the time, I guess, right?
Right. In New Mexico and in Albuquerque, we have a very Hispanic machismo culture where your culture is very, you're not better than me. Really, they don't care if you can play soccer. At the bottom line, I always call it the bottom line. They don't care if you're good in math. It's can you beat me up? And so that was what was important to us as kids. Who can beat who up? We all idolized the boxers, and then as the kickboxers came along, we idolized them. So that's the nature of the beast. It's a very, very macho culture.
A primitive time of MMA, I find it really interesting. My brother and I have been watching the UFC since UFC 1, which for a lot of guys like yourself who were in the mix even earlier, that's still late in the game, even all the way back to UFC 1. But I found it amazing that the Gracies came along with that style that people were just scratching their head like, what jiu-jitsu, what does it mean? Why is the guy wrapping his legs around? And why did the other guy tap out? Does it really hurt that bad? What are they doing?
Right. Well, the Gracies are so amazing. Like, I love that. They're always so nice to me, just personally. Like, they're good people. But what they did, they changed everything. So for me, like, Bruce Lee was an amazing guy, and he was one of the guys that kind of on paper said what MMA needed to be, right? And he showed it, and he was like trying to, he got on the soapbox and said, hey, listen, we need to do this, but not a lot changed. Like, really, it didn't. People had the idea, Jeet Kune Do and all these cool things, and he was right about all of it, but there wasn't like a sweeping revolution. People were still like, well, Jeet Kune Do is one style and karate's another, and you know what I mean? Like, the Gracies are what changed it. Because I was there. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. People will be like, oh, this, that, and the other thing.
It was so exciting back then when you would think of, this great football player or great strongman athlete, someone like a Bill Kazmaier or somebody like Mike Tyson. And then you were wondering, like, well, what would happen if, Mike Tyson fought the, number one karate expert? And what if he fought like Chuck Norris or whoever we know at the time as being like an expert or a master or a black belt or whatever you want to call him?
Right.
You always wondered, like, what would happen, and now you don't really have to wonder anymore. Like, if somebody thinks they're tough, if somebody wants to test their mettle, they go into MMA, right?
Right. Well, that's right. But then you have to remember that. So that is exceptionally good for one-on-one stuff, right? But the martial arts do have another component where if you're fighting 2 or 3 guys, if you take somebody down, get him in the mount, and have the perfect ground and pound, and his friend comes and kicks you in the head, and that move isn't. So it's all about appropriate techniques at appropriate time. But as far as one-on-one combat, you're not going to find anything better than that. And the lessons that we get from that, what I always call our little feedback machine, where you can get empirical, immediate feedback. Did this wound work? Did it not? Can it work for this style of fighter, that style of fighter? That's a lot of fun, but the most important thing, I think, is that the UFC mixed martial arts is a laboratory where you can, like you say, it's exciting, not just about that style matchup, but then when you take it one step further, what new techniques can you throw into that machine, and it spits back out at you results almost immediately. Like, so if you see these moves work 3 or 5 times, great, you got a new move.
Do you maybe miss a little bit of the beginning stages of some of this stuff where it was more secretive?
Nope.
Like, you had to probably go through a lot of trouble to try to find information. The Gracies, like you said, they really open the doors for everybody. But do you kind of miss some of that, or do you like that it's so wide open?
I don't miss any of it. The creative process for me, I didn't really have an instructor, right? There was nobody here teaching me jiu-jitsu. I had some good, like an Aikido instructor and some karate, and I did a bunch of weapon stuff, but you don't really have an instructor to guide you. So I had to figure it all out myself. So that has still been going on. Like, I still get taught. The coaches here are amazing. I learn from them all the time, but I also still can try to figure things out. So that part hasn't changed. I don't miss the showing up and not knowing what the rules are. I don't miss the absolutely no money, losing money on every single trip we take, just doing it for the love of it, which I still do. So now at least there's, it's people like you are here talking to me, and we can show how cool the martial arts are, which for me is very important. So I like to do these interviews. But I don't miss the days of showing up and having rules meeting mean something. A rules meeting used to be like, okay, well, it's, closed fist, no, open hand to the face. No, this one you can do closed fist all the way. You know what I mean? Like, it was just crazy.
Yeah. Do you still train yourself quite a bit in this kind of stuff? You do striking and things like that, and grapple and stuff?
I do. My body is not has not held up as much as I would have liked. But I still get in there. There's a good feeling of not getting punched too hard, just hard enough to be like, oh yeah, that's kind of what it's about, but not too hard where you're like, woo. So that's nice. It's nice to get in the mix a little bit. And I miss grappling a lot. I'm trying to get back, like being very smart about who I grapple with. But yeah, the old body hasn't held up.
Do these guys come after you like you have a bullseye on you, or are they more respectful?
But usually they're more respectful. Sometimes there's a bullseye. But what happens is that when they start, no matter who they are, when they start losing, that's when it gets a little bit more heated. So as long as we keep it at a very normal level, I'm usually all right. But
my team tries to beat me on everything. It doesn't matter if it's a lateral raise or a lat pull down or a bench press. They're like, if I can get him on this, I'm going to try to kick his ass.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, it's that competitive, cooperative environment. I think that's very important here. So you have to have a little bit of both.
Right. What fighter over the last maybe several years has really pushed you the most in terms of maybe like your thought process? Maybe somebody came in and made you just kind of like rethink maybe even like the way you train people, or somebody really maybe has opened up your eyes to some other aspects of MMA that maybe you weren't aware of before?
I don't know if one fighter has done that. Certainly the MMA environment has done that. I've certainly grown as a person in the MMA environment. I don't know if one fighter like revolutionized or changed anything for me. I think that like coaches will come in and show me really cool stuff. I'm really grateful. They'll give me seeds too of things that I can take in different directions. So some coaches have really showed me stuff where I'm like, oh wow, that's great. That's amazing. And that's a lot of fun. I would hate to be the guy that knew it all. I think that would be like the worst, right? Like imagine what would you do? How would you learn? Like, so I really love learning new techniques. I really love thinking of new things. And so we've had that. And then some fighters come in too and do like John Jones' spinning elbow. You know, I never really thought of doing it at all those angles that he does until he did that. And then I was like, wow, and we can do it here and here and here. So I think there's been fighters that have helped me along that process. There have been coaches that helped me along that process. But I wouldn't put one guy that was like mind blown just because so many people have contributed over the years.
This place is amazing. I don't know, 40,000, 50,000 square feet, something like that.
Yeah, about 40. Yep.
Yeah, so you got a huge facility, and then you actually have fighters that live here.
Yes.
What is some of that like? And I would imagine, there must be, even if it's unintentional, there must be like a mentoring process that goes on. There must be a leadership process that kind of occurs here, which I think is really cool for a lot of these young men and women.
Yeah, some of the older fighters will take the lead, and we have some great coaches here that really, like Joey Villasenor is a great example of that. As a guy, he's like kind of like Uncle Joe. That he takes the amateurs and he works with them, and he tells them when the transition to professional should happen. We have a lot of great Brandon Gibson. We have a lot of great coaches here that kind of mentor the young guys and say, hey, here's how it's done. And then there's a lot of self-policing. The guys we want to set a culture in here that you're tough but kind. And so that there's a lot of self-policing in that, where, if you're getting out of line, your fellow fighters will sit down and say, listen, settle down, guy.
Is it pretty strict around here and like organized, or is it more like, hey, like this, you're coming in and you're just coming in at your level and you're going to have to try to figure out a way to sort of keep up? Or do you guys say like, okay, this is where these guys are at, we got to slow everything down and teach them this way, kind of thing?
A little bit of both. It's organized, but then you also have to go, like, there's a lot of people that want to jump right into the pro class. It's the whole, so like being an MMA fighter sounds a lot cooler than it is, especially if you're talking to the opposite sex and you're sitting and you're talking about how tough you are and all this stuff. So then when you actually get into the pool that's pretty deep, a lot of people will struggle to swim. And so putting them in the right place, putting them in an amateur class, that kind of stuff is very important, because especially with fighting, everybody thinks they're better than they are. It's just the nature of the beast, and that's not a bad thing. It is a bad thing if you like can't adjust to the situation. Like, no, I belong in the pro class. And you're like, okay, I'm telling you, kid, like relax. It's a long journey.
You probably get pretty damn busy with all this, especially a lot of travel for the top fighters and things like that. Are there some fighters in here that you don't get an opportunity to see for a little while, and then as they're coming up, you start to get to see them, or do you try to invest time in everybody the second they get here, just to kind of get a feel for how they fight and stuff like that?
Right. Well, you couldn't. I mean, there's so many people coming daily.
There's like 60 or something.
No,
or
more
something.
than that. We probably full-time pro fighters. We probably got between 80 and 100.
Yeah.
So there's just no way you can qualify.
And then all the visitors. You got people from all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So having that. So what I try to do is have them work up to myself and Mr. Winklejohn and kind of the higher level coaches, where we work at kind of the top level and give them a goal to kind of work up to, if you want my ridiculous butt in your corner. So that's the way we structure it. So we have a lot of coaches here that mentor them through that process. And there's some people we actively recruit, like come over and we work with them right away. And there's some people that kind of have to work their way up to the top.
What's an average day look like here? Like, is it like, someone comes in and rings an alarm at 5 o'clock or something like that, and they all go out for a run, or
pretty much? No, the first class is at 9:30. So usually a lot of them will warm up, workout, and then we have 3 or 4 classes every day. And then the coaches are just working private lesson after private lesson after private lesson. We have probably 3 to 5 coaches doing that with all these different fighters throughout the day. So we have 2 pro classes, then an amateur class, then another pro class, then another amateur class. And then like Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have jiu-jitsu at night. So it's a full time. We have 5 or 6 classes a day with just professionals. We don't let anybody, there's no public here. So either you're an amateur fighter training to fight, or you're a professional fighter that's professional. So there's no mom and pop. There's no anything like that.
So there's not like there's not classes here to kind of like quote unquote keep the lights on, which you hear a lot from a lot of other MMA gyms.
Right. Well, and you kind of have to, right? But yeah, no, here is it's just MMA fighters. That's it.
And then my understanding is you have other gyms as well?
Yeah, we have a couple of gyms where we have just for normal people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want to do the martial arts side of it.
Somebody wants to kick a bag and learn some strikes and stuff.
Exactly. So we have a couple of gyms there too, but I try to not be as involved there as I am here, because this is a full-time. It's a full-time gig.
Yeah, I bet. Do the men and women that live here, obviously they're going to take it out on the mat, I guess. Take it out, and you have cages in here, so they can get their aggression out there. Do they get heated? It must get competitive at some point.
Yeah, it does a little bit. We have a good gym manager here, Misha, he's kind of on top of all that when people get a little squirrely. And again, usually it's self-correcting. There's so many people here that if somebody's getting squirrely, 5 or 6 guys will calm it down. So if the problem gets to me, then that means that something's really gone wrong. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't have to hear about, which isn't how it used to be. We moved into this place about 3 years ago, and before that, it was me all the time, just drama machine all the time. So now Mr. Winklejohn takes care of a lot of it for me. He's a sweetheart like that. Misha takes care of a lot of it so that I don't have to. I did my time. I did my 23, 24 years in the trenches, and so it's nice to relax a little bit.
Yeah, you have to really manage the personalities, and they must be, the personality of fighters must be kind of all over the map, right?
Professional babysitting, that's what I say all the time. It really is. It's very rewarding, but they're very passionate people. So you have, 60, 70 alpha personalities all mixing together, that it all can usually actually fight, which is another thing. Like a lot of times you have alpha personalities, but they're like business guys or lawyers or, whatever, like a soccer player or something. You're like, okay. So yeah, that's not really an alpha personality. You have alpha personalities that can fight. That's a different level.
Do you have these guys do some different things? Since it's like MMA all day, like do these guys do some stuff like it's someone's birthday? Do they do something all together, or you guys try to plan anything for them or anything like that?
Yeah, we do have some team stuff. Just because it's so massive and there's so many different cultures that it's usually not. Because we have like Polish people hanging out with Mongolian people, hanging out with Japanese people, hanging out with Brazilians. And so there's so many cultures that it's an event just to be here. So they'll they have everybody has their little cliques of friends, but it's really cool. For me, that's one of the coolest parts is to see all these cultures interact with each other. And English being the common language that they all speak just a little bit of. But it's a lot of fun to see the mix and the friendships that get formed here. That 2 people that would never meet each other otherwise. It's kind of cool.
What's something that you learned through this whole process of dealing with this amount of people that you were able to take into business or take into your everyday life?
I think the big thing is just personality management, just understanding. So I always call myself, like people ask me, what do I do for a living? And I usually say I'm a martial arts teacher, but really what I am is a problem solver. So what they do is they give you such dynamic problems. The fight itself is a problem. The personality management's a problem. Everything's a problem. So what it's really taught me is how to keep my cool and problem solve no matter what the parameters are. Give me what the parameters are, and then I need to figure out the best way to get the best results out of any situation. And I'd say that just the crucible of that, of having to do it over and over and over, year after year, week after week, has made me a decent problem solver. I wouldn't say I was the greatest one on the planet or anything like that, but I'm pretty good at my job because you can, and it goes to anything, games, whatever it is. Like if you give me long enough where I sit down and study it a little bit, I'm able to figure out a solution that works well. And that's pretty much my only talent. I can't cook. Lord knows I can't dress.
Yeah, you know, what I hear and what we always see, like kind of in the media, is that there's like all these problems through like everyone's fight camp, and it's like all the time, right? And fighters actually will get paranoid if something doesn't go wrong. They'll kind of be worried, like, oh man, I didn't hurt anything this time around.
No, that's absolutely right. No, it's insanity. All of it's insanity. But it's entertaining. I'm never bored. I'll tell you that.
I guess the stakes get higher, though, you know, as the competition's coming closer, probably implementing more things in their training. There's probably lifting and running and so on. And then some of those things taper back down, and probably a lot of questions go on in their head. How do you kind of coach these guys through self-doubt and, you know, just kind of going off the rails almost?
Well, the periodization is very important. It's very, very important in a fight camp, doing, you know, where you're doing your volume, and it's fighter to fighter. There's not one formula that works for everybody. I'm sure, as you guys know in your sport as well. But a lot of it is just dealing with pressure, dealing with mental pressure. So there's nobody's life's really on the line. So we're not like soldiers where if you mess up, people are going to die. But there is a different kind of pressure where you are going to there's hyper judgment. Everybody's going to think ill of you or better of you. There's expectations to manage. There's a lot of things that really weigh down on people's ability to perform. So just managing those emotions, understanding how to stay in the process and not let all that stuff pull you out is important. And so that's a lot of my job.
What's been maybe like the most exciting thing that's happened in your time of coaching?
Oh, wow. That's a question.
There's probably, there's probably a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
You can give me a list.
Well, you have to remember how many fights I've done. I mean, for a long time there, it was every weekend and it was multiple fights. So I've got to be in the thousands at least. And so you have that process. That Hollywood story is played out over and over again, every way you could do it. Victory, close defeat, major defeat, and it's over and over and over and over again. I guess I have moments that I remember that are exciting, but I think the most exciting thing is that I still get to do it, like that I still get to be a part of the process, that I still get to like wake up and I get to go do martial arts. That's cool. It's like cool. Just the thought of that, like I don't work for really anybody. I work for my fighters, and the other half of my life, where I do a lot of work with special operators and police officers, and I work with them for them, but I don't work for any one person. No one person can wake up and be like, Greg, you can't go here and do that. And so that's exciting to me, that I get to do what I love and set my own terms.
I think that's cool that you have that perspective, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to work for myself and I'm just going to make my own hours and do my own thing. But that's only sort of true. You still are working for
right. And make your own hours means that you have no days off, no time. Like, I don't know if people really understand what it means to be a legit entrepreneur, like a real, like I'm going to have to work 14 to 16 hours a day, and I'm not going to have to take weekends. Yeah. Like you guys get to go to the lake and have fun, and I'll be here working with the next fighter and the next guy, and I'll do the next one, and I'll do the next one, and I'll do the next one. Fighters sacrifice for a small point, you know, and then they go crazy and they sacrifice. Coaches like me and Mr. Winklejohn, we sacrifice 24/7. Like there's it will maybe once a year take 1 week off.
What is the hardest part of it all, you think? I mean, since you love it so much, probably doesn't necessarily always seem that hard. But
yeah, the hardest part isn't the martial arts, nor is it the fighting. I think the hardest part is I had to come to terms with the entertainment aspect of it, coming from where I come from, and so just dealing with like the entertainment side, and not because I hate it, just because it's boring. Like I'm not wired normally. Like I don't get excited about football or even fighting or anything. Like I just like, oh, cool, you did that, awesome. And so like I can never get that perspective, and so that's where I clash a lot. Like I just want to do the martial arts. Everybody wants to see, oh, those guys really don't like each other. Oh, they're gonna throw. Man, did you see what so and so said about so and so? Right? Because it's a male soap opera, right? Like and you know, everybody in their culture has their cultural soap opera. This is our cultural soap opera, and they love it. They love it. That's why professional wrestling figured it out and then write scripts about it. They had it right. They understand what people want. They want to see that. And then they want to see like inspiring performances, not necessarily intelligent performances. They want to be inspired. So what is MMA? It's basically a tool to be inspired. Like, what is a good fight to somebody? A good fight to an American is both just going life and death. This guy's almost knocked down. This guy, why? Why is that a good fight? Well, because they can see their courage. There's no lying. There's no hiding, right? They can see this bald face. So they wouldn't like a Muhammad Ali style where he would just bunk, 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 run around. Like you couldn't touch him and he would just punch you in the face for 15 minutes. People hate that. They're like, no, that's not fighting. That's cowardly. Because that's what people don't want, actual fighting. They want drama. So coming to grips with things like that was very difficult for me, I think. And then just dealing with even interviews like this are cool because we're talking about stuff that isn't like Holly's next fight. Oh, tell me all about it. You know what I mean? Like that to me, like I get why the fans love it.
I heard this person from this camp said this about her.
Right, exactly.
And said this about you.
Right, exactly. So that stuff and it's not that I hated it. I'm just not interested in it. It's boring. And man, one of my personality weaknesses is I don't do well when I'm bored. Like I'm not a good human. So it's just irritating. Like, so that part. And then for me, the travel really burned me out about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I burned out hard, just for fight after fight after fight after fight. I hit my limit and was barely hanging on, and had to kind of claw myself back out of that again. But so that burnout is my biggest enemy. And so dealing with that, making sure that I time manage, make sure that I prioritize myself and a little bit, I think is helping out. It's not natural to me. I feel like entitled if I do it. So the people in my life have to remind me, take a day off. Okay.
Is it hard to get over some of the adrenaline, that happens when, like Holly Holmes, wins the title, or Bones Jones wins the title again? Is it hard for you to kind of come back down to reality, or, like, have you ever found yourself caught up maybe when you were younger in wanting to go out, wanting to like get the celebration, or have you always kind of been different to that?
Yeah, no, the fight's always been for them. I love the process. So that process for me is fun. And honestly, the biggest fights that we've had I'm the least excited about, just because I don't have the luxury of being a fan. Like I can't go in there and go, oh my God, it's amazing. I don't know. Because I'm in a position where I have to make decisions that might affect the outcome of the fight. I have to make sure that everybody's okay. And that's not for me. The victory, the elation, that stuff, that's for the fighters. The process is for me. Getting them ready for it is for me. So when they do the process and we win, I go, oh, cool, right on. I have a great process. I just want to do it again. Like, but that emotional elation is something that I have to be a little bit more cool about. Like I have to be a little bit more reserved, because if you find yourself being pulled into that, you're not thinking about the fight and the process. You're thinking about the emotion that you will feel, or have felt. And that to me is something that's outside of work. Like, listen, when I watch my daughter sing in the chorus or something, and I get choked like that, I'm in the process of emotion. That's my time. That's my work. That's my job. So I get happy for the fighter. I'm like, yeah, they did it. You know what I mean? Like, but the win is for them. The losses I always take for me, right? I didn't do the process right. I didn't figure it out. Which I used to get heat from in the old days. People would be like, oh, well, maybe the other fighter had something to do with it, Greg. He's amazing. And I never think that way. I always think my guy can always beat you. I just didn't figure out how to do it, right? Like, so that process is what I love. And it helps me stay focused. Like, and no matter what I'm doing, if you're jumping out of an airplane, if you're doing whatever it is, when you're in the process, then you're successful. When you let emotions, fear or elation, anything pull you out of that process, you're not going to be successful eventually.
Well, and as a coach that wants to turn people into champions, or help turn people into champions, your mind has to also be like, okay, we won the belt. We're supposed to win. Like, right. we trained really hard. We had a strategy. I thought that, it would work. You were able to execute it in the ring. Exactly. It worked. And now we have the belt, and now the hard work starts, because now,
right.
now we're the champion. Now we got a bullseye on our back. So you're probably almost thinking about the next fight almost right away.
Yeah, I try to get
sense.
the next fight though to me is next week, right? Like, so then this fight happened. Now I have another pressure cooker, and they're all the biggest fights ever because that's the way the media pushes it. This is the greatest fight. No, this time is the biggest fight. Okay, now it's this time, and that's their job, right?
They
got
to
say
it every time. The
right,
biggest fight of all
right,
time.
exactly. So, and that's their job.
history.
Like 100%. That's cool. Like, good for them. That's their job. But for me, that's not. It's just the work, right? It's what I do. It's my process. So I do get happy, but the joy really is for the fighter, and honestly, also for the fans. Like, they have fans that believe in them or they rooted for them. They get to share in that joy. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think anybody that gets super excited, people say, "Oh, so somebody won from our team on the TV, and we were jumping up and down and hugging each other," and that's a beautiful thing, right? They share the joy, they share the pain, but for me, that's not something that's shared with me. Because I am in a position where I have to make decisions, I have to be out of that a little bit.
What about like social media? Does some of that bother you too? Because you're mentioning kind of the entertainment side,
right? Well, it
irks
doesn't
you a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me much because I'm not on it much. I'll put out like some Twitter, Instagram stuff, but I don't. I'm not on it 24. You know what I mean? I don't check it.
Right.
I have people that help. Hey, Greg, we should post something. And I say, oh, this sounds fun. Something like that.
Good.
But I don't like to do a lot of feedback just because what that is a pressure release, like a valve, a steam valve. Right. So what kind of person you are then determines what kind of fan you are. So let's say your life is not what you thought it would be, or you're angry at somebody, and you can get on the internet and be like, you are the worst. Like, you have so much anger, right? But that's necessary. It's necessary for society. There's this great book called Trickster Makes This World that really changed my perspective on that. Like, the more, like, Mardi Gras is like, you know what I mean? You have to blow off the steam. You've got Lent and stuff coming up right around the corner. So you have to have these pressure things. So that's what, in the entertainment business, that's what it is. You have to be able to get online and just express all this anger. So that's great. Like, if you hate on us and not hit your kid, good, more power to you. Like, that's our job. Take it, right? But again, for me, that's just boring. Like, I'm not really interested in looking at all the steam coming out of unnecessary, and I get it, like, completely necessary. But that's not my job, right? That's not what I'm about. That's not what I'm into. So, like, getting on everybody's comments and reading what people say, like, if they hate it, great. Like, if you love it, great. But as long as you're really blowing off steam, getting that pressure off of you, then good. But that's not for me.
In terms of fighting, what have you seen fighting do for some people? Because obviously that must be a release in some sense too. They'll even, people say you have anxiety or you're, feeling you're angry, go punch a punching bag and
right.
You just punch the hell out of it for 30 seconds and you'll be winded, right?
Right. Well, there's a difference between martial arts and fighting. Fighting is the entertainment element of martial arts. So you can get crossover. There are people that have martial arts have changed their life. But fighting a lot of times amplifies bad behavior. It amplifies weaknesses in your personality because it's the entertainment business. The entertainment business does that. The martial arts side helps you work on that. So, and I think that's why it's important in MMA to try to keep some kind of a martial arts tradition, because the martial arts itself actually teaches you, okay, when you're angry, calm down and refocus. If you're being self-centered, relax and be self-aware. You know what I mean? Like, just use your skills for defense. You don't need to like bully people and stuff. So I think that's important. Fighting is the entertainment element where you're going to talk crap about your opponent. They're going to talk crap about you, and everybody's going to love it. And that's the entertaining value. But like that, being humble and stuff has value if that's a weakness in your personality that's going to ultimately leave you unhappy. And I know a lot of ex-fighters, boxers, kickboxers, and MMA fighters that are not happy individuals. And all fighting did was delay that. Like, they're financially, they can take care of themselves, which is a huge, huge deal. But outside of that, their personality hasn't evolved. Some of them gain wisdom. Some of them are sweet. But the martial art ones, like Georges St-Pierre is a great example of it. Happy as a clam, like good dude, but he was a martial artist fighter. He didn't go in and do the entertainment thing. He did the martial arts thing. And I think that has value. And there's people that are really good people that do the entertainment thing. So
there's some people that maybe when they're done, they're still right? They still have these holes because the fighting was just kind of filling that gap in for a while.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's a delay. And again, it's an amplification. A lot of people's bad behaviors are amplified and tolerated because you're an entertainer. When you're an entertainer, it's not just fighters, actors. There's a lot of people whose like crazy behavior, because they have to deal with such a crazy world, their behavior is then kind of also crazy. And yeah, you get a lot of amplification of personality flaws.
You mentioned your daughter earlier. I have 2 kids as well, and like when my son played baseball, he'd hit the ball, and like you just start welting up.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my god, I'm the biggest baby in the world.
Yeah.
I've handled some heavy weights in lifting and gotten hurt many times, tore muscles and stuff.
Sure.
Never cried once about any of that stuff.
Right. Well, there's a rule, right? Like you can't cry from physical pain, just from emotional pain.
Yeah. What over the years, what has been something that maybe has struck a chord with you in here, something that has struck a chord with you when you saw a fighter where you're just overwhelmed, you're like, I don't even know what happened to me, but like I'm balling.
I haven't had that kind of an emotional reaction. I think I've had moments where I've definitely lost it. I got pulled out of the process. When we trained Rashad Evans for years and years, everybody was saying how he'd never finished a fight and he was a boring fighter. And I forget the fighter that he actually mounted and finished, but I jumped the cage. I mean, we had worked so hard on it. We had worked like so diligently on getting his ground and pound up to speed that when he won, I don't remember being outside of the cage. And then
Could you normally jump over the cage?
No,
you think?
no, that's the first and only time I've ever done that.
You had to keep rewinding it.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. But yeah, that's the only time I've ever done that. So you get moments, right? I mean, listen, everything that you could possibly do, and almost everything, I'm sure there's things that I haven't done, but because it's been so many hundreds and probably a little over 1,000 fights now, I've done it in some way. Like I've made the hugest screw ups you could ever imagine. I've done the best dig out, we were going to lose for sure, and I was able to affect the outcome of the fight. I've had every spectrum in there between, so it's not if it could be done, it's been done. I'm sure I've cried somewhere as it popped into my head immediately, but I'm sure I've anything that can be any way that you could think about. It's like watching Rocky, except it's instead of what are we on, Rocky 12 or whatever it is, right. It's Rocky 1530, right? Like it's that.
Has anyone kind of proved you wrong where you just thought that you thought a certain way, you thought a certain thing, or you thought a certain thing about them? Have they been able to maybe prove you wrong? Maybe you just thought their training camp sucked, and you just, even though you're trying to be as positive as you can, you're like, we don't have much to work with here, and they still go out and knock the guy out or whatever.
That's actually an interesting question, because for me, it's about relentless optimism. So fighting isn't, it's non-linear dynamic. So you can't go into a fight and say, like everybody tries to do, and say, okay, well, this guy jabs and runs away, and this guy just throws crosses, and so the jabs guy is always going to win. Like you can't do that in fighting. So no matter what, you always have to think you're going to win. So I always go in with that attitude, like we'll figure it out. Now, have we not been as prepared as I would have liked? Absolutely. And then I'm like, wow, I'm really glad that he pulled that out, because so I've had those moments a lot. But I have a reckless optimism, I think, that defines what being a warrior is. And a warrior is pragmatism is for preparation, and optimism is for combat. So you want to be pragmatically prepared, but then and when it comes to fight time, you're just going to win. Like it's okay, but I'm going to win. And I think having that dynamic is super important. So I learned pretty early on in my own life, like that relentless optimism. Like if they can't take that away from you, then you've got everything that you need. So if you keep getting hit and you keep getting bonked and rustled down, and you're like, well, I'm still going to win. Like if they don't take that from you, then, and you don't mentally break, then you're fine. So as a coach, I try to emulate that on the other side of it, saying, listen, my guy, up to the very last minute, my guys, let's find something. Let's try to find something. So I try my best to stay in that process for that.
When you watch like football or basketball or baseball, baseball and basketball actually come to mind. They do like a best of 7 series, right? And they go at it back and forth, and you can provide, different strategies as a coach. And, one game the ball could like literally bounce your way versus the next one. I always found it really interesting in fighting how someone just clearly gets they clearly get beat. I mean, every once in a while, like somebody just gets caught with a bomb or something like that, but they kind of get destroyed. And then there they are again. You know, this is a one-on-one competition, and I always find it to be to show so much resilience. It's like, how in the hell did this guy come back? He got blasted in the face, 50 times last time these guys fought. Why in the hell is he even bothering? Why is he back in the ring again? And then, sure enough, the guy figures out a way to beat him. Is it similar to other sports where just like strategy and technique can be just that big a part of it?
Unfortunately, I'm not educated enough on other sports to answer that question. I can tell you that in combat, for sure, there are these kind of underlying strategical principles that govern all sports. Anything that is a competitive, including evolution, anything that's competitive are governed by these ideas. You want to try to, maximize. You want to force array. You want to have as many steps in between you losing and your opponent as possible. So they have to work through all these layers. You want to have it'll get technical and we'll be here all day. But my point is that these underlying principles govern chess, tennis, fighting, all that stuff. So I think that, yes, I'm not educated enough in particular sport to show examples of it, but I am educated enough in strategy to say that it will definitely affect the outcome of anything that has to do with competition. So any kind of competitive one-on-one, in other words, I am competing against you or against outside pressures, be it nature or whatever you want to define outside pressures. If you are competing against something, and some would say including yourself, then there are definitely these rules. Like physics has rules, right? Like this pen drops, you know exactly where that's going to go. A great way to think about strategy is that. So like this predictability in a system, you know where that's going to drop every time. But 200 years ago, if I said, you know what, the same force that pulls that pen down to the desk keeps the moon around the earth, you would think I was insane. But that's how strategy is. Like the same strategy that we use in MMA is the same strategy that a chess player uses in chess. Parts of it, because that's a much more closed system, but that a tennis player uses, that a bowler uses, that anybody that has to deal with strategical kind of impetuses.
So you'd have to maybe like explain to the fighter too a little bit, like almost kind of with that example of the pen, you'd have to say, look, this is kind of just black and white. This is what the guy did, and this is how he came out on top, and almost make it like it's not a big deal. Is that how you kind of
depends on the fighter? Yeah. Everybody's different. Some fighters respond to that. Some you got to get them emotionally. Some you have to be like, oh no, that was a fluke, and we're showing him this time why. You know what I mean? It all depends on the fighter. There's no one formula. If there was, then somebody would win every fight, right? Like that's the thing about it is it's nonlinear dynamics. There's so many little small things that have such huge effects. Sometimes you can read them, sometimes you can't. I was watching, I'm a huge student of boxing and the old combat arts, and I was watching one of my favorite trainers, Customato, talk about the idea of character. He said that's what it really takes to be a champion, is character. And he's really right. Like putting up with all the social media pressures, putting up with the pain and being able to handle all of that stuff is what he's talking about when he talks about character. And there's a reason, I think, not just technically, that Jose Torres and, of course, everybody knows Mike Tyson, Floyd Patterson, all of these guys that he trained and did well with. But I think he saw something in those guys where they had character, and even Mike having to go through all the things that he went through when Cuss was gone.
Yeah.
I think that idea of character really means something. And as I've trained a lot of these champions, I really kind of see that is one of the defining things, is how they put up with all the outside drama.
Yeah, that's almost like in some way more impressive than what they do in the ring sometimes.
It really is.
The amount of fans they got to put up with, the amount of haters they got, like all the different things.
And pressure all the time, expectations, because if you remove yourself from it, they pull you back into it, right? And they can't, if you're a fighter, you can't not be on social media. Part of it's your job, but part of it's just this vacuous magnet that you have to pull back.
That's what it does for Conor McGregor.
Right, exactly. Right. So you have to be able to deal with, you have to have the strength of character to be able to deal with that stuff. And I think it's hard. I've seen it break a lot of fighters that had the talent to be there, but they couldn't handle the mental side of it.
Yeah, I guess one of the sad things with Customato and Tyson is that Tyson kind of asked him, like, how do you deal with, if I want to be champion and we're talking about being champion, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with like the popularity? And he said, like no one can tell you that. Like you can't. Like
Right.
there's not a way to figure out like what
Right.
it's like to be like Madonna or Michael
Right.
Jackson
Right.
or any of these people or Michael Jordan. Like there's
Right.
who could tell you about it other than maybe those people themselves, right? They might be able to tell you
Right.
about the pitfalls. That maybe a Georges St-Pierre or a Bones Jones could tell you, like how isolating it is and just how weird it might be.
Yeah, I think it's isolating in some aspects, and then not everyone is in your business in other aspects. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. And just to see over the years how the different fighters, like Marvin Hagler, who would just like disappear. Like I'm out. He wouldn't
Yeah.
take phone calls. He wouldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like I'm gone. You couldn't do that today. I mean, there's
Right.
just too many demands from the organization on you to promote the fight. So that would be very hard. But I think people like Mike Tyson have been through the ups and downs and made terrible mistakes and made good decisions. And those are the really interesting guys for me to talk to, just because they know they've been there. They've done the wrong thing. They've done the right thing. And they have so much wisdom that, like, not just in fighting, but those old timers like that. Not that they're that old, but
Yeah.
that those guys are, to me, when they talk, I listen. I like to hear what they have to say about the world.
I always thought Mike Tyson was one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, just because he doesn't play basketball, people don't think about
Right.
like the athleticism. And obviously,
yeah.
Muhammad Ali had a ton of athleticism as
Every
well.
fighter does, yeah.
But I always just thought the explosiveness, the speed, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that Mike Tyson would be a much better athlete than most baseball,
Yeah,
football
right.
players. Yeah, like they're just like, you have to keep that consistency up over and over and over and over. Explode, 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 explode. There's the rest of your team. You can walk and rest. Okay, let's do it again. There's nothing like that in fighting. It's over and over and over and over and over. Wrestlers have that especially. That's why a lot of wrestlers make great fighters, is you get kind of that idea punished into your head.
Who are some of the biggest mutants that you worked with? Some of the biggest, you know, people that they're just freaks, like genetically, like, not necessarily muscular or anything like that, but just athletically. You ask them to do something, you show them something, boom, they got it, and they almost master it, you know, better than you even demonstrated it.
That we have a lot of those guys that really learn extremely well. And then we have like John Jones, when he's in shape, just doesn't fade. So he's not like incredibly fast. He's fast, but he's not like, no one watches a John Jones fight and goes, he's the fastest human on the planet. Nobody says that. He just doesn't fade. Like, he'll fight in the 5th round is better than he fought in the 1st. And so there's that, he has this weird ability to just constantly put pressure on you and not fade. And then people like George could just explode out of nowhere. GSP just boom. Carlos Condit doesn't, when he's in shape, he doesn't fade either. He just keeps going and going and going and going when he's at his best. So you have these different personalities and these different athletes, even within fighting. Some of them are super explosive. Some of them are just consistent. You get a lot of different types of athletes, but they're all incredible athletes.
What do you think makes a champion? What makes, you know, John Jones, Holly Holmes, and some of these other people that you've trained? What makes them different?
They've got to be coachable. That's a big deal. They've got to handle all their stuff outside. That's a big deal. But they also have to have a crazy work ethic. Like, if the whole team does one thing, they have to want to do 5 more reps. That's one thing that I've noticed, is that when everybody else is done, they'll go do just a little bit more. And I think that's one of the most important elements as I'm older and as I've, you know, as I study the great minds around the sport, like Customato, these people that are 10 million times a better trainer than I'll ever be. As I study them and listen to what they say in their experiences, and at this point in my life, my experiences, character is a big deal. And because I think it encompasses all of that. They're going to do 5 more reps. They're going to go, we'll all be done sprinting, and Holly will run back while we walk back to the mountain. Or when we're sprinting on the mountains, she'll run home while we walk home, that kind of stuff.
Do the champions know when to maybe pull the plug a little bit too? Or do you have to help them with that?
Pull the plug as in?
Just stop, like, just, you know, like, so they're not overdoing it, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, that's my job. Yeah,
Right.
Especially some of them that just overtrain all the time, like constantly overtraining. So if they show up flat in the fight, they have these amazing workouts and everybody's oohing and awing, and then when they show up in the fight, they're flat. It drives me bananas. Yeah.
Are you aware of some of the other training that they do, or do they go off and do
No, I'm aware.
some lifting or something that maybe?
Well, yeah, but we all
Share
Yeah,
together.
exactly. We have to share information. How many times are you
have
doing
to know
what?
everything.
Right. And then I just read their bodies. Like sometimes, because again, there's what's frustrating. I think that people really want that they don't have. There's no formula. because your body reacts a different week. So like week 3 in camp, you might be in super shape. I want to do 2 more rounds, but you're not periodized right, so you way overdid it. So fight time comes and you're flat. You already gave your best rounds 3 weeks ago. So knowing, pull back, or you need to push it a little bit more. It's such a feedback-oriented system where you have to watch your fighter, see where their patterns are, see he's consistently tired in two sparring sessions, then that next day he needs to take it off, relax for 2 days. It's so hard for them because my opponent's training right now, which has nothing to do with anything, right? Like, but that is a big part of my job.
Does it happen sometimes where you're like, man, this training session's just going like shit, and then you find out that they've been on a low carb diet for the last 2 weeks or something weird?
Yeah, sometimes. So they didn't sleep for 2 days.
They didn't tell you something, and you're like, oh, well, that would have helped.
Well, I sit them down. I'm like, what's going on? Like,
right.
Yeah, are you feeling tired? What's going on? And sometimes they'll usually tell me, oh, this, that, and the other.
How technical do you guys get? Because I know some people are like using apps and they're using things to track sleep and different things like that. Does the team?
We do. Well, we do a lot of heart rate stuff. But again, so much of it is psychological. People look for science to solve, again, nonlinear dynamics. So again, it's kind of like, tell me what the weather's going to be in 2.5 weeks. You can give me an idea,
right,
but because of nonlinear dynamics, you can't tell me that on Tuesday in 2.5 weeks it is going to be storming. That's just not going to happen. So,
hey, Dr. Bo, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Doc. So that's how fighting is, right? Like, there's so many things and so many little, you tweak an ankle, that changes everything. We have to train around that. So sorry, Dr. Bo derailed me.
He does that a lot.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is that there's no one predictive model that will give you success. You have approximations. You can say, if I, do whatever heavy volume, and as I get closer to the fight, I taper off into less but more intense. That's a good idea. Then it's just about knowing your fighter. Like, this guy responds well to this. This guy does not respond well to that. So it has to be very individualized.
And because of that, do you allow the fighter a little bit of leeway? Let's let him try this diet for a while. Let's let him, they're all obsessed with this sleep tracker or whatever. Let's just let him get over it. Let him figure it out.
Well, anything that's going to help.
Right.
So some fighters, it's an arms race, and a fighter's always looking for an edge. So, and I mean, you can be a snake oil salesman to a fighter like nobody else. If you said, I'm going to give you this rock, and you're going to sleep deeply, and it's going to bring your punch rep up by 12, every fighter would buy it. Oh, they don't even need proof. All they need is some kind of scientific jargon, and they will 100% jump on it, because it's an arms race. You're always looking for an edge. What am I going to take in with me in this scary situation to give me an edge over this guy that's trying to knock me unconscious?
That makes a lot of sense. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of. That's a good question. I think I'm
Dr. Bo. Dr. Bo Hightower. You're most proud of him?
I'm most proud of the doctor.
He is handsome.
He's keeping me walking, literally.
I mean, I think it's cool what you have going on here with all these fighters.
Yeah, I think,
having an opportunity to like live out their dreams. And you were pointing. One guy was from Poland, another guy was from. I mean, people are from all over the place. Pretty cool.
I think that's cool. Like, I guess I'm more flattered and I guess confused. Like, why would they want to trade with me in a little ways? But I think what I'm most proud of is my friendships. I think that that's the thing that I'm pretty much friends with everybody, like, and that's cool. People, I didn't get into this business to be friends, bro. And then I always watch in fighters or people just like bragging about manipulating people and bragging like, manipulating in a fight's one thing, but like, I pretended to be his friend and then I got this information. You know what I mean? Like, just like, and they're proud of it, or I don't know. It's just gross to me. Like I'm proud that I try to be a good friend to my friends, and I have a lot of them for some reason. And I guess that's what I'm the most proud of. I'm most proud of my friends.
Are the best fighters in the world, are they, from the people that I've been around, people that I've seen, which hasn't been a lot, the people that are like really skilled at like jiu-jitsu, or the people that are high level fighters, they're usually like pretty happy and pretty nice. Is it a combination though? Are some people like still like mean even after they've kind of like mastered a certain thing? Or,
well, keep in mind that a lot of times that's your representative. So like when you first date a girl, you don't date the girl, you date her representative, right? She's cool, she's awesome, she's this, she's that. But 6 months later, if she's a real person, then okay, that wasn't a representative, that was her. But a lot of times you're not dealing with, when you deal with a fighter, you're not dealing with the dark undercurrent of that person. You're dealing with the, hey, I know I can beat up pretty much everybody in this room. There might be one or two guys that give me a run, but I'm cool. Right. Like that's usually what you're dealing with the guys on that level. But if you dig deep enough, they're mean. Like they have to be. Like that's their job. Like your job is to smash another person's face. And you can be like, oh, I just like the competition. But well, there's a lot of places to compete. You can go be a tennis player. Soccer's awesome, but these dudes smash each other. So there's a dark current in all of us. So identifying that, understanding that that's there and still being cool, I think is a very, very big accomplishment. So when I meet fighters that are very mellow and nice and seem to be at peace with themselves, to me, that's not an indication that they are at peace with themselves, but it is an indication that they're evolved enough as a person to be nice to other people. And I think that's beyond important because nobody likes a jerk. Right.
Yeah. A lot of the people that I've interviewed, a lot of the fighters I've interviewed, they've kind of played it off as you were mentioning. They're like, oh no, I'm asking them basically, are you crazy? Like,
yeah.
People are punching you in the face, and
that's right.
You got to punch and kick them.
They don't have any. There's no what's their test against, right? You know what I mean? Like everybody's crazy in this place, right. and rightly so. Again, I would much rather be here with crazy people trying to punch me in the face than working at a bank somewhere or as a lawyer somewhere. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't imagine a worse job. Like pretending you're, well, in the law, by the law, like I couldn't imagine somebody walking in and just, well, I'm a business guy. I'm an alpha male. And then somebody just smacking you and being like, cops, please help me. Like that idea is hateful to me. I don't like that idea. So I would rather be here with the crazy people than there with those crazy people.
How do you stay out in front of it with such a busy schedule? You probably have a lot of things coming up soon. And
yeah,
do you look at the calendar?
Yep, I have to be pretty.
Look at it every day, every night. Like how do you plan some of your days?
You're not wrong. Pretty much every day I have to look and see what my next day is. And as a matter of fact, I've worked a little system out where I won't look at my calendar for like a day and a half on the weekends. I'll try to not look at it. Just be like, again, because if I have to get slapped in the back of my head, prioritize yourself.
Your heart to
right. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, I got to do this. I got to do that. Like I can't stop. And so I have to force myself to stop. And that's much harder for a personality like me than it would seem. I'll lay awake at night going, you know what? I think this move's going to work. I have to wait all the way till the morning to see if it's going to work. Or, so-and-so, I forgot to show him circling to the left and his fighter is going to be throwing whatever and he needs to circle to the left. Damn it. So I'll write myself little things on the phone or whatever, but just I have to find ways to make it stop.
What's coming up next? Speaking of that,
well, we just had a big win overseas, and was it Sweden? Was it UFC yet? Devin won, so we had that. I think Bavon Lewis is up on the 8th, and then Aaron Pico and Patchy that I'll be cornering in Madison Square Garden on the 14th, and then I think I don't have anything till Jones, Diego, and Holly. I think that's the next fight after that. So yeah.
Is that tiring at all? Like when you have like 3 or 4 fighters on the same card, or?
I almost prefer it. I'd rather have them all in one night than 3 weeks in a row. You know what I mean? And then I do a lot of work with the police department here and different police departments. So, and that helps me out a lot too. Kind of, it's combat, but it's de-escalation. It's trying to take violence out of situations and stuff. Except for the operators, obviously, that's a little different. But like with the police, so
it must be way different than just what you're
right. It is. So that's a lot of fun. That helps me not get burned out too. Just doing new curriculums, new ways to work as a team, to kind of hold somebody, constrain them, if you will. Or, if you're an operator working with these other great combatives programs to figure out good ways for these guys to stay alive when they're downrange. So
before we kind of drop off here, what's who does like the kind of conditioning work for the athletes? Is that mainly through you and that mainly through like a lot of the mat work, or is conditioning like outsourced to somebody else?
It's outsourced to a lot, because remember, we have so many fighters that one guy couldn't do it. Like you couldn't keep track of it all.
Right.
You'd go crazy. So we outsource it to a lot of different schools. levels. I work personally with Elevate here in town. It's a great guys. Adrian's the owner, and he's a great dude, and he works with a lot of my high-level guys. And between him and Dr. Hightower, they keep me walking, literally keep me walking at this point. So it's outsourced a lot. It has to be.
General conditioning through here, though, just from doing
Yeah,
all
sport
the different
specific,
things, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're only going to strength and condition once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, because the rest of it's just sport specific. I mean, you're doing 5-6 rounds in here, intense, 5-minute rounds plus grappling, plus wrestling, plus whatever else.
Cool, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no worries.
Really appreciate it, man. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Thanks
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
down. Oh, no worries. My pleasure.
I have a quick question for you.
Yo.
Did you find out? Oh, yeah. Might as well.
Oh, we got a special guest coming in here.
I just wanted to know if you found it difficult not being a professional MMA fighter and getting into the sport as a trainer, because it was so new back then. There wasn't even fighting around for you to be part of, right? So,
Right.
you didn't, have you had any professional fights?
never had.
Zero,
Never
right?
once,
So
yeah.
was it hard for you to gain the respect of the fighters in the beginning?
No, because I was in there tooling them up every day. So and the early fighters will tell you, they would come in and I'm this like dorky, skinny little white guy, and all of them would be like, "You're going to teach me fighting?" And then we get on. I
guess that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You faced that in the beginning a little bit.
Yeah,
but-
100%. Because remember, I was 17 years old. So imagine a guy your age now coming in and learning from a 17-year-old kid. You'd be like, "What?
Yeah.
This skinny little thing?" Well, my saving grace was I trained all the time. I sparred. I just finished fighting all the time in my own life. So I was a very, very capable person at that point. So I had to get in the mats with each and all of my guys all the time, and battle and battle and battle and battle. So then when I'm running with you, I'll do the dieting with you. I'm beating you in practice up until, when I get them, when my students got good enough where it was very competitive, but I'm right there with you. Then it's easy to listen to you. Then
So
you can say,
as long as you whoop them up, they have some respect.
you have to. And that was early on. And so now, I mean, I'm an old, broken down, fat old coach, but my success rate now, people
they just look at the
listen to
record
me.
now.
Right, and they say, "Oh, well, maybe he knows what he's talking about. He's had, a bunch of world champions or whatever." But early on, I just had to prove myself all the time. So if people got squirrely or whatever, I'd be like, "Oh, let's go spar. Oh, let's go at it." And so then you kept people in line.
Awesome. That was just burning in my mind the whole time. I was wondering if
Yeah, I think it's
people
harder.
ever-
I think it's harder to be an MMA coach now than when I was younger for a lot of reasons. But that's one of them. Is if you come in as a coach and you're not in there banging it out with your guys, which it's going to be almost impossible to do now.
Yeah.
I mean, remember we were all learning back then. I mean, it was the Gracies had it figured out, but nobody else did. It was
a brand new sport.
Right? Yeah, we were just going at it and figuring. We'd go to all these grappling tournaments and do extremely well there, and all these NHB fights, and we did extremely well there. But it was all a learning experience, and the Gracies had been doing it since I think 1925 is when they started.
and the guy you
they're
talked
brilliant.
about a lot was Customato, and he never fought professional either. I don't
Right,
think,
exactly. Well, and I think that's important. I think that a lot of times that dark hole that we were talking about with fighters, I think that if you don't fix that personality and you have those massive insecurities, most fighters are massively insecure and they're just brave about it, right? And they just try to hit it head on. But underneath, they're massively insecure. I think that when you put those people in leadership positions, there's a lot of negative stuff that happens around them. There's a lot of when you are an angry person and you haven't dealt with it, you haven't got through it. I think that a lot of fighters don't make great coaches because of that, because they're in a different role now. It's a leadership role, and you have to be dispassionate and fair, and you have to figure out what's best for everybody else, not just for yourself. And I think that's a hard transition for people because fighting is almost like a religious experience, right? It's all about you and you growing. You have to have the food. You have to have the training. You have to do this. You have to do the sacrifices. Then to suddenly say, okay, now it's no longer about you, except cursory, and it's about everybody else. That's a hard transition to make. And then especially if you have insecurity, that's my big thing that I see a lot is that they're like, well, I have to look, I have to appear strong, or I have to, they're super emotional. They're not thinking, well, what's the best outcome for everybody involved? How can everybody win? Sometimes they can't, but what's at least, let's try that. And so I think that's one of the things that makes it harder for fighters to become coaches, but it also, as a coach, if you're not, you have to get people's respect. So either another coach tells you, hey, you respect this guy. The fighter then says, okay, you're helping me out, and that the respect is given that way. But I think it's a lot harder to earn the respect now than it was when I was young.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Sorry to go on.
We're out.